Travis, here. I'm going to kick this off and then I'll turn it over to you. But just wanted to say welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for caring to show up. This is a topic that is core to my passions when it comes to sport. And thanks to those that will watch this later, teams that will watch this together. Thank you so much for taking this seriously. Special thanks to Travis, of course, for giving this talk during dinner hour. No doubt the end of this, you'll have some family members tapping their feet ready for you, but this simply being in hopes that we could increase our attendance. So thank you for that. Before we get started with this meeting, I do want to point something out. If we zoom out to a stratospheric level and take a look at American sports under one lens, we realize that America does not have a squeaky clean sporting culture when it comes to competing ethically on the world stage. Thanks to Travis and USADA, sports like cycling, track and field, baseball, as you'll hear from his bio, has been dramatically cleaned up. However, what is unique to our sport, cross-country skiing, is that we can currently boast that America does have a squeaky clean culture. We have to go all the way back to 1988 when an American Nordic combined skier missed the Olympics because of blood doping. And this isn't even the same sport that I'm involved in, and yet I still feel a scar from when I was 10. And I would also like to acknowledge tonight that this uniqueness of our ability to remain clean in cross-country skiing. I want to say this clearly, that we are humans too. Americans are humans too. American cross-country skiers are humans too. And we must not take our clean sport culture for granted. We'll lose it to the same shame that has befallen other nations at times. And it is 100% up to us to maintain. It is not just my job as head coach. It is the first-year coaches on this call. It is the job of junior racers talking about this topic amongst your teammates, starting early. And so I would like to thank Travis, the hero of my teams, and for his work and all of USADA's work in support of cleaning up sport. And in case you're only basically getting up to speed now on who Travis is, I'm going to read his bio because it's pretty remarkable. And then we'll let him talk. Travis has worked with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, also known as USADA, since the inception of it in 2000. And he became USADA's CEO in September of 2007, having served as its Director of Legal Affairs and General Counsel prior to becoming its CEO. As CEO, Travis works closely with USADA's board of directors to carry out the organization's mission of preserving the integrity of competition, inspiring true sport, and protecting the rights of clean athletes. Since becoming CEO, Travis has reached out and made himself available to many Olympic athletes, interjecting here, including myself and those on my team. He's embraced them as an essential part of the fight against doping. Travis was recognized for these efforts when he was awarded the USA Swimming Award in 2016 and won the USA Swimming Athletes Appreciation Award in 2019. He is accessible, as you see here. Under Tygart's leadership, some of USADA's most significant efforts to protect clean athletes have come from in the form of major investigations. Working alongside federal authorities, USADA investigated the international steroid bust, Operation Raw Deal, and the international doping conspiracy involving the Balco laboratory in San Francisco. Tygart also led the investigation into the U.S. Postal Service's pro cycling team doping conspiracy and the Lance Armstrong case. Tygart has also led the international effort to advocate for justice and reform in the aftermath of Russian state-sponsored doping schemes. This effort has ignited a movement to change the global anti-doping system, to make it more independent, and to give athletes a stronger voice and a vote in these decisions. As well, these efforts led to the passage of the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Fraud Act a landmark new law that criminalizes international doping fraud. Tygart's tenure as CEO has produced many other achievements for clean athletes, including groundbreaking research on the importance of true sport. Quote, what sport means in America, end quote, and the, quote, True Sport Report, end quote. These efforts led to the founding of USADA's True Sport program, a movement to ensure all athletes have the right to a healthy, safe, and good sport. Travis is a 93 graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel with a BA in philosophy. And after teaching and coaching high school for a few years, he earned a law degree from Southern Methodist University, where he graduated Order of the Coif. Travis received the Distinguished Young Alumni Award in 2010 from UNC at Chapel Hill and the Alumni Award from SMU in 2014. He has also been recognized by Time Magazine as one of the most influential people, ranking in their Time 100 list in 2013, and was recognized by Sports Illustrated too as one of the 50 most influential people in sport. Travis and his wife Nicole have 3 children. Their ages are 19, 17, and 14. And it is my absolute honor to welcome you to this talk, Travis.
Matt, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It's actually embarrassing, right? I hate all that stuff. It ought to be, what are you going to do next, right? Like, what have you done for me lately is a better introduction. But listen, I really appreciate, having gotten to know you over the past, however long it's been, 5 to 7 years, and really appreciate and humbled by the invitation to be here, and just really honored to have an opportunity to speak, with you, but also to your team and others in your community. And listen, I think it is a community effort, right? And it doesn't happen but for people like you, who are willing to stand up for what's right in sport and what's good in sport, and then really taking ownership of it, ensuring that it stays as clean as it can be. And your leadership, along with others like Becky Scott, who I think initially introduced us a few years ago, it's relying on individuals that have the courage, the ethic, the moral code, so to speak, to ensure that athletes have an equal opportunity to compete on a level playing field. So, Matt, I greatly appreciate it. Really honored to be here. I would love for this to be in person. I'd love for it to be as interactive as possible. I have put together a few slides. Hopefully, Matt, you're seeing those still with a thumbs up.
Yeah, looks good.
Let me just talk to those a little bit. I think I have a chat function, but I'm also, happy and would love, if people are comfortable turning on cameras and want to raise a hand and ask a question, feel free to do it. I'll hopefully have plenty of time, here in just a few minutes to take questions, but that's a much more engaging and interactive way for me to do this, and would love to be able to do that with you all. I tell you, I wrote down a note, Matt, on the introduction before you got to the resume part, but on the important stuff of what you said. And it's interesting. I really do believe in the United States, we're trying to do the right thing, and our athletes are raised in a generation that they know, to be a hero, a role model in the Olympic movement and the Paralympic movement. You're going to be held to the highest standards, and they welcome that challenge. It's not always easy. It's inconvenient at times. It's intrusive at times, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But I do believe there is, that commitment to ensuring that, those who play by the rules and ultimately win, because you have to be able to win clean in order for the system, I think, to work. And, what I can tell you is we're fighting here every day to give people the opportunity to win at the highest levels, not just to go out there and, finish, but actually to win the right way. And I think that's a really important nuance that we're fighting for every day. But I tell you, when I first got into anti-doping, I was a young lawyer, a year or so out of law school, came to Colorado Springs, and where I am today, Olympic City, USA, as many of you know, home of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee and many of the national federations. The U.S. was seen as the dirtiest country in the world. And in part, it was seen that way because, one, we were winning, right? And I'm not sure there was a lot of proof that we were the dirtiest, but certainly it was a different system and a much less effective system. There wasn't an independent organization, and I'll touch on that a little bit later, but the independence is a cornerstone, I think, to the success. It used to be our national federation, so U.S. Ski and Snowboard, USA Swimming, that would handle investigations or positive tests. The U.S. Olympic Committee was the one testing the athletes. They had back in those days what they called the STARS program, and what that was is there were marquee athletes, that national governing bodies invested money in that never got tested. Or if they were going to get tested, they were told, hey, we're going to come a week from now to test you, so you better be ready. And oh, by the way, here are things like the green tea and other stories of things you can do to make sure you're ready when we come to test you. So it was an entirely different climate. And I think, having seen that history and the evolution, to the things that you've said about cross-country skiing and what you're doing and other sports are doing, cycling, I think across our sports, the bias is in favor of clean sport. I firmly believe here in the United States and in many parts of the world. Certainly there are parts of the world, talk a little bit about Russia in a second. There's certainly parts of the world where, unfortunately that's not necessarily the case. And there's still a lot of work to be done, because I think it is, in my view and our view here at the office, the greatest injustice in sport is when one athlete robs another athlete because they're intentionally breaking the rules by using performance enhancing drugs to gain an advantage. And it robs. I mean, just today, you saw, if you follow this stuff closely, you saw our U.S. figure skating team come out with a press release about here we are almost a year later from the Winter Olympics, when their medal ceremony has been put on hold because a Russian skater, Valieva, tested positive. And that case has still not been resolved, which is just a real tragedy. And think about it for a second. They could be gold medalists if the Russian team is disqualified because of the positive. At a minimum, they're silver medalists, but yet they haven't gotten their medals. They haven't been able to tell their sponsors, hey, you owe me X amount of money because I'm a silver medalist. They can't go to gear companies and tell them I'm a silver medalist, and that means I get a 15% premium on my market value. They haven't been able to go and have their hometown parades. Their life and to some extent, their identity as athletes has been put on hold because of a positive test, that unfortunately overshadowed the games in a large part, once again coming out of the Russian system. And so you can't underestimate, if you've talked to athletes like we have and sat down with athletes who have been adversely affected by it, you can't possibly imagine how devastating a situation is to be beat by someone that cheats you, and have your opportunity delayed or postponed, right at this point, over going on a year because of this issue. So our hope is to give everyone, around the world, but certainly our jurisdiction is here in the United States, but hope that you can win clean. And while no system is perfect, what you can hear from me and what we push for every day is to ensure that we're working as hard every single minute, smarter, better, faster, to make it as perfect and as just of a system as it can be. And we talk around our office that, as hard as you all, for those that are, competing on this or that may watch this, and Matt, what you try to instill in them, as hard as you're competing to win, we have to be willing to do the same to allow you to win clean, or your effort, your sacrifice is actually not worth it. So we take that burden seriously, and that responsibility is at the forethought of what we do each and every day, because we don't want you to have your dreams not fulfilled because something that we could have done better to prevent someone from robbing or cheating you. So, all that said, if you have questions or concerns, I'm going to give my email at the end. Feel free to get in touch. We love critical feedback. One thing that makes elite athletes as good as they are is the mind of a champion is not afraid to critique itself and push itself on every little point to be better. That's how we operate here, right? We want We want feedback. We want critical analysis. We're pushing every day to be as perfect as we possibly can. We know we're not perfect, but we want to be, and we're pushing ourselves every day to do that because we know many of you and all of our elite level athletes are relying on us to do it right and have their back to make sure that they can win the right way. So please, wait till the end and send me an email and we'll get in touch. So real quick, you see the title, clean sport and cross country, but I think it applies to all sport, why it matters. And I think it absolutely still matters. This issue of cheating in sport by doping or cheating in other ways, it's not just unique to sport. Quite honestly, I mean, you guys see the headlines almost on a daily basis. Just a few, cartoons that I've pulled over the years. Yeah, we know about the fraud in the corporate world. It almost as if in this country, you have to cheat to get ahead, and that's a message we sometimes think it exists. But I'm telling you, it's not the way it should be, and it's not how it's supposed to be. I don't think I hope kids don't grow up today saying, "Oh, I can't wait to be a professional athlete and have to inject myself with potentially dangerous drugs in order to be the best that I can be against the rules, so I can be a cheater, but hopefully nobody finds out and I can get away with it." That's not what you dream about, right? That's not the podium in the Olympic goal. So we're here to prevent that from happening. I found this recent, I don't know if there's a date on it that we can read. Yeah, Friday, October 7th of 2022. So, less than 6 months old, but it was awesome in that it identified 3 areas that this cheating has hit the highest level, and 3 areas you wouldn't think it would possibly hit this level. One is global chess, right? So you have allegations of some of the top chess players, both on chess.com as well as live tournaments. One of the players having an earpiece allegedly, opening up a computer screen, having the computer make the calls for them. And it's created this huge controversy. And I didn't fully appreciate it before reading these articles. Millions of dollars can be won playing e-chess through chess.com and other games. The other one that struck me as kind of interesting is you see the fish, fishermen and women, right? They catch fish, they win prizes based on the weight. Well, hey, when you get it in the boat, just put some, beads down his throat, some weights down his throat, and then we go to shore and weigh it. It'll be heavier. It's just like crazy that people would go to this link, but I think that's in large part the culture that we see out there. And I think it's in part why it's so important to commit to doing it the right way and being willing to take ownership of that community to ensure that others who might be willing to win that way aren't allowed to get away with it. Then the last one that I just simply can't believe, and I grew up in the Southeast where football, American football, is huge sport. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, where the Florida, Gators every year play the Georgia Bulldogs. It's the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. But what I can promise you is they play a lot of cornhole at these SEC, ACC football games. But here's one where the National Cornhole Tournament has found competitors. I guess you bring your own bean bags to cornhole. I had no idea. They're bringing, bean bags that aren't within the regulation. They might be slightly heavier, they might be slightly smaller, and they're able to gain an advantage to win with, breaking the rules, breaking the regulations in cornhole. And so I think the temptation of this win at all cost culture, if it's getting to cornhole, it's at every level regardless. And I think it also, that emphasizes why it's so important at the levels that we have jurisdiction over, is to ensure that we have a good system that gives support and allows those who the rules were designed to protect. It allows them to play the game or compete at the highest levels under the rules of the game and to be successful winning, because we know, the temptation will be to try to get around those rules. The other ethical piece that hit me, and I put this in here, Matt, assuming there might be some younger high school kids participating, but this one hit. This is a similar ethical question. It actually, my daughter, who was a junior in college, I'll never forget when she came home, and this was pre-COVID, when she was going to take the SAT. And she's like, Dad, we're at dinner. And she's like, Dad, so-and-so, was talking about how they got their doctor to fabricate having ADHD, attention deficit disorder, so that they could, get an untimed SAT. And I'm just shaking my head like, my gosh, I might have been able to get a passing score on the SAT if I had all day to take it. Like, that's the challenge in it, right? It's, I don't know, 2.5 or 3 hours, whatever it is. And it's a tough test in part because of the time pressures. But here you've got kids in high school whose parents are going with them to fabricate a diagnosis in order to have more time on the SAT, so their college application can be, a better application. And look, it's an ethical decision, right? And it's a tough, maybe it's not against the law. It's clearly, the doctor might be violating some law, but this is the society, unfortunately, that we live in. And I say that to the young, particularly the youth that might be on the call or that might watch this. It's just a matter of time when you're going to be confronted with a really difficult ethical decision. And you might find yourself trying to justify doing the wrong thing and hopefully what you know to be the wrong thing. And clearly, if it's against the rules, it gives you an unfair advantage. That's against what you should be doing. And I do think it's that simple. And I would just challenge you to, one, be ready for it. And then decide, what are you going to do? And, I really challenged my daughter. I wish I had an easy answer. Do you want to, talk to people at the administration about it? Do you want to just go along with it? And just say they'll get an advantage and they get into schools that you don't get into because their SAT score was better because they had all day to take it? You're going to have to live with that. You're not going to join them, right? Like, we're not going to go down that path. That's not an option. So thinking through logically what the situation looks like and finding areas you can go to get help, I think is really, and guidance, I think is really important for you. So in sport, to get to anti-doping more particularly from this, ethical win at all cost culture that I think we face in a lot of industries, the World Anti-Doping Code is very clear on what the rules are. And that's the set of rules. I know the elite athletes that are here and that will watch this know, hopefully, the World Anti-Doping Code. That's what applies around the world to, athletes all around the world. And I pulled out one quote from it just to give you a sense that it is there to protect athletes, their fundamental right to participate in doping-free sport. And what I love, because, the lawyer in me loves, is this right to, basically an equal opportunity to be the best. And the rules are there are designed to protect you who are following the rules. You see here why we're in business. And as Matt said in the introduction, it's for athletes. Our North Star is to protect athletes. This is one of our top marathoners who was robbed, later got her medal, Shalane Flanagan, many of you all know. Alicia Montana, who lost to Russians who were later disqualified. Kara Goucher similarly got, years later, a medal ceremony on a medal that she rightfully was upgraded to because people in front of her were disqualified. So this is the heart and the soul of why we're here and what we do to try to protect athletes. So how do we do that? Education is a key component. There's sort of 4 pillars that I'll talk about, but education is absolutely essential. And I put some examples, and to be a little bit more practical for anybody in our testing pool or that may be tested or, is rising through the ranks and has questions about it. You see a couple different logos. If you need to get your medications checked because you're taking some medication and you want to know if it's on the prohibited list, there's a electronic database on an app. You can do that through Global Dro. Go in, type in your sport, cross-country skiing, type in the medication. It will come up and tell you whether or not you're allowed to take that in competition, out of competition. So we're trying, from an education standpoint, trying to make it as easy as possible for athletes to be successful in the program. One other area of education, and this is more sort of for, if there's coaches at the, just below the elite level, our True Sport program, amazing content. We actually have about 75 national governing bodies in other sports that are what we call content partners. But we've got experts who are sending out, how to hydrate on game day, or how to eat a healthy, post game or post workout meal. What about supplements? What about medications? How do I, mentally prepare for a loss? These types of, lessons that help people and athletes and coaches be the best that they can be and win without having to resort to breaking the rules and to potentially using performance enhancing drugs. One area that I'll want to focus a little bit on is the supplements. And Matt, feel free, we can follow up with more of this if it's helpful, but we've got a website, and it links off of our main website, but it's called Supplements Connect. It used to be called Supplements 411, which some of you may be interested in. Supplements, and when I say supplements, that's a term of art, but it's, think of anything that's not a food, and that line's getting a little bit blurrier, and anything that's not a drug that you need a prescription for, or an over-the-counter medication. But it's, a vitamin, a mineral, a herb, botanical, whey proteins, creatines, any vitamins, prenatal, calcium, L-carnitine, all that falls under here in the US, a particular piece of legislation. And there's not a ton of pre-market regulation. There's like registration, but it doesn't do much in our opinion. And so what's really important, if you are using supplements, and look, we know based on surveys that we've done with athletes directly, but also others have done, roughly 90% of elite level athletes are using some form of, supplementation. And I get it. If you're traveling, food in different parts of the world is different. You need your nutrients. You're obviously burning a ton of calories when you train and compete. And so it's hard not to want to rely on something. What I would tell you is there is no, pill or powder or liquid that's going to make you faster or stronger or swifter. And if it does, it should raise a red flag. But what I would encourage you, one is have good, sound nutritional advice why you're using it, if you're using it. Ensure that it's not in any high risk category. And on this website that you see, Supplement Connect, we actually test product and put it on this website, and you can see if it's ever caused a positive test, or the things that are on there have caused positive tests. The problem is there is no guarantee to any supplement. And so any supplement you take is at some level of risk. So you've got to mitigate your level of risk and get it as low as you possibly can. What we recommend is, one, having good advice of what you're taking, and it's not, hey, my teammate said it helped them swim faster. Like that's not the good advice we're talking about. It's someone knowledgeable about what your body needs, what yours, how you're training, how you're eating, and from a experienced and documented recent nutritional standpoint. And then if you feel like you can't get that through food, then you've got to mitigate the risk of a positive test. Or if you're not in a testing program, some adverse health effect, right? Because we've heard, and you can see on that website, heavy metals, other contaminants. I'll tell you, we've had just as one anecdote, but there's more data on this site that I would encourage you to go to. But we literally have had a gummy, so like a chewable vitamin that we've tested from a reputable store, a reputable brand in that space, that was positive for ostarine, which is a prohibited substance. It's a SARM, a selective androgen receptor modulator, that was at a level that would have caused a positive test. So, that one to me was pretty startling. I knew the levels and the percentage of contaminants, particularly drugs that would cause positive tests, was high within certain categories. So muscle building or testosterone enhancers, that's sort of common sense, I think, to some level. But, a daily vitamin that's a gummy, being also positive. So I say that not to scare anybody, but just to hopefully convince you to go through the analysis of whether or not you truly need it. If you do truly need it, then take every precaution and measure you can to mitigate your risk. And I think that is a certified program, and you'll see on that website sort of a criteria that we think is the best, because there are a number of certified programs out there now that all have various levels of criteria. So anyway, sorry to dive a little bit too much in that, Matt, but I thought for this audience that was a really important message. And again, go to the website, feel free to shoot me an email, happy to help navigate that at all. Obviously testing, and I think most of the audience is aware, urine and blood test is absolutely essential. And I don't want to be too elementary here, but you obviously have to do year-round testing because there are drugs that you can use out of season, EPO, human growth hormone, anabolic steroids, that will give you the impact that performance-wise that you want, or recovery-wise, however you use it. You'll test negative at the event, however long away it is after use, but the drugs will be out of your system. And so it's absolutely essential to test year-round, off-season, out of competition, because again, you can use certain drugs that will give you an advantage. You'll keep that advantage, but they'll be out of your system if you only test at the event. And so that's why, urine, blood year-round is really important. And just on the blood point, we would love to do only urine, but there are certain drugs that there is no valid urine test for, human growth hormone being one of them. As much money as we put into it and others, is just simply not scientifically feasible. And so we have to draw blood in order to detect human growth hormone. So, for example, in the NCAA program, they don't do any blood testing. What does that tell me? Man, athletes that want to cheat in NCAA using human growth hormone, there's no chance, because they don't blood test, that you're going to get caught using it. That's a big problem. That's a system that is not there, in our opinion, that's supporting athletes that want to be clean, want to win clean, and the way that they should be supported. So that's just one example of why, both the blood and urine in competition and out of competition testing is so critically important. We wish it was just this easy, right? And unfortunately it's not, but that's an area we're continuing to push. Second sort of big pillar, so we talked about education, we talked about testing, is research. We're pushing the research as much as we can, as fast as we can. Unfortunately, we're bound to the limits of science, and we want only good science out in the field. And it is, a significant challenge. And it's why we get to the fourth prong. I'll spend a little bit of time on, and hopefully we can entertain some questions. Is what we call the results management. You see the slide here about investigations, but this is when we get evidence. Maybe it's a positive test, maybe it's other evidence, eyewitnesses, videotapes, admissions, that kind of evidence, that we then can show someone has violated the rules by evidence, whether it contains a positive test in the traditional sense or not. And, a couple of examples, before I get to a couple of examples, the key here is the independence. And Matt, in your gracious, introduction, if we've had success, it's been because of our independence. Like our focus here at USADA is not promoting sport. And there are a lot of wonderful people who promote sport and do a great job at promoting sport who also want it clean. But, there is potentially a conflict when you have to, take away 7 Tours de France from, a global icon. That's a terrible day for sport. That's a bad day for us as well, but that's our job. And so while we obviously are cognizant and consider the ramifications, our duty and our oath is to uphold the rules. We're not here to promote sport. So you know, we don't want to see bad things happen to sport. That's not the motive whatsoever. And it is a terrible day. And it means our education failed. And it means we weren't able to convince people that playing the right way was the way to do it. We'd love to put our results management prong out of business. But I think we're also realistic to the pressures that athletes face and coaches face when it comes time to winning. And we have to have the enforcement element to the program in order for all, you know, 4 prongs of the program to work together to be effective. But the independence is absolutely key. And I think that also brings the trust and the decision making, that it's not there because someone's famous or someone's wealthy or someone's going to be the medal winner. The decisions are based on an objective, unbiased view of the evidence and the facts. And obviously, you know, the Armstrong case is an example of that. What I'll say is, and happy to answer some questions if people are interested. Listen, it was, and to this day, cases that we've been involved with and had to handle. It was the most powerful case of intentional doping and a conspiracy among a number of people, including the team director and doctors hired by the team, you know, that we've ever seen. And yes, there was a dirty culture in cycling for sure. And it's why not everyone was cheating. There were many that weren't. And many that weren't actually got kicked out of the sport. And several of them, you know, whether Scott Mercier or Darren Baker, they would tell you, look, we couldn't get the contract, even though we could keep up clean. They didn't want us clean. They wanted people that would be willing to dope. And so, you know, we basically got ganged up on and got kicked out of the sport well before we were ready because it became so dirty. So that is, you know, obviously been shown through our investigation, but a number of other investigations. You know, at the end of the day, you see just examples, categories of the evidence. And again, it's the most powerful case of doping. And so, you know, while it's not a good day, it's actually a really tough and difficult day. And when I say, if there was any, you know, reason or duty that we had to promote sport or otherwise do something other than uphold the rules, it would have been real easy to attempt to justify that, because the ramifications were horrible, the personal, you know, outcomes were horrible, and nobody wishes that upon any person. And many of us here, you know, respected and saw athletes as heroes, including Lance Armstrong. So that was not a fun episode, but it in a lot of ways was the easiest we've ever had because the evidence was so powerful. And the question really became, are we going to do our job and uphold the oath we took, or are we not? And of course, the answer is, of course we are. We have to. And so given the level of evidence, in a lot of ways, it was one of the easiest cases we ever had to make decisions on. Here's just some blood values of Armstrong. And this would have been an exhibit in the case had he challenged it. He ultimately decided not to and accepted, by not challenging, accepted the lifetime ban. But this is cutting edge analysis of blood parameters. And this is really important in cross-country skiing to help analyze, you know, hemoglobin, reticulocytes. And I don't want to get too much into science, and I'm not the scientist, but you know, the eye can show you a variation that is unnatural. And particularly we've overlaid, you see the TDF there, that's the Tour de France. One of those days was the rest day. But you see the day after the rest day, a huge spike in the hemoglobin and reticulocytes. And, you know, the expert evidence is, and testimony by one of the world's and several of the world's, but the world's top hematologists, that doesn't happen but for blood doping. 1 in a million chance that's anything other than some form of blood doping. And so this data that we collect on an individual athlete becomes extremely powerful when looked at over time on an individual athlete, particularly when it's overlaid on what competition schedules look like. And you can imagine, you know, doing a pint of blood or, you know, some EPO on the rest day, rest, go back out and compete. It's going to elevate your oxygen level capacity and the red blood cells that you damaged through the race up to that point are going to be replenished. It's against the rules, and it's clearly been against the rules. In fact, in France at the time, it was a crime. And so there's no question that there was a violation here. And obviously, ultimately, Armstrong Lance, acknowledged most of this. So from there, you see a number, and I point this out just to comment briefly on the Rodchenkov Act, and then I'm going to, hopefully take some questions. That has led to a number of other global episodes where, it's been shown that leaders of sport have taken money to cover up tests. Here you've got, the FIFA corruption, not anti-doping related, but corruption within sport. Here you've got the former head of track and field who was charged in France with crimes for taking money to cover up Russian cases. There was an independent investigation into weightlifting. This next slide, head of weightlifting got ousted after 40 years. Again, evidence of knowingly covering up positive tests to allow dirty athletes to compete in world championship level events. You've got biathlon. There's been a number, it's been exposed. Again, Russia, buying favor, covering up tests. And so it goes back a little bit to the independence point and making sure that from a regulatory, enforcement of the rule standpoint, it's not conflicted with those that might be subject to, things that happen sometimes in business, whether they're illegal or not, but clearly, adverse to the interest of clean sport. I'm going to skip through a little bit of this just for time. We all know, I think, about Russia state-sponsored doping, and that, again, the most egregious situation, far eclipsed on the breadth of it and the depth of it than what we saw in the U.S. Postal Service's case. Obviously, the world is still trying to address and handle effectively this situation. Russia, the Russian anti-doping agency, our equivalent there, is still not compliant. It's frustrating to us that testers from outside of Russia are not, because of the invasion into Ukraine, are not able to get in there effectively. And so we worry right now that Russian athletes are, subject to not a compliant testing program. And we do think it's an issue that has to be addressed. We think it should be treated like the retirement rule, where you have to be subject to independent compliant testing outside of your home country for 6 months. If someone retires under the rules and wants to come back to compete, they have to be in a registered testing pool and subject to testing for 6 months before they can compete. And we think at a minimum that ought to apply in this situation. Ultimately, that's a decision that WADA is going to have to make, and the global community, but we'll ultimately see how it plays out. But it's incredibly frustrating. And I mentioned this, I think most of you, if you follow sport closely or watch the Winter Games, which hopefully you did or were there, some of you possibly, it unfortunately once again overshadowed a lot of the wonderful competition that was happening. And was just I called it a catastrophic failure in the anti-doping system. The test took entirely too long to be reported, going on 6 to 7 weeks, which is unacceptable. How it was then handled was unacceptable. Here we are, justice delayed is justice denied. The team today, the U.S. team, sent out, a message that they're still waiting, and here we are a year later. And it's a maddening. From my perspective, if you care about athletes, if you talk to athletes, the system has to be better to protect athletes around the world. So very quickly, there is a new federal law, and I mention this because in a really good way, the international Olympic world, which has not really been present in the United States that much really since 96 Summer Olympic Games, 02 Winter Games in Salt Lake City. I think it's coming back. Well, it is coming back to the United States in a really big way. Last summer we had first time ever the World Athletics Championships in Eugene, Oregon. We just were up testing at the FISU Winter World University Games. Some of you may have competed in Lake Placid. We've got obviously the World Cup, FIFA coming in 2026. Of course, the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games, hopefully, whether 2030, 2034, the Winter Olympic Game, I'm sorry, 2028 Summer Games, 2030 or 2034, the Winter Games, hopefully coming back to Salt Lake City seems to be headed, in that direction as we hope it does and as it should from our perspective. But this act gives us the ability to ensure that these games are not going to be like Sochi, where, the state officials in Russia, the lab in Russia, the Russian anti-doping agency perpetuated a cheating scheme at the highest levels. And don't forget, Russia went from 11th place in 2010 on the medal count at the Winter Games in Vancouver to first place just 4 years later. Like, there might be a little bit of a home field advantage, but not that big of a home field advantage, I can assure you. And it was as a result of their state-sponsored doping system that knowingly doped athletes and knowingly sent athletes to major international competitions, including the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympic Games, to cheat the world for all the wrong reasons. So we're hopeful this act, this act is going to give us a basis. If we're involved with the testing and the pre-games testing and enforcing this act to ensure at the greatest level yet that what we see here that happens in the United States is truly a pageantry of clean sport, and that the world can have, confidence that that's what they're going to see. So I'm going to skip the detail on that. One case has been brought under it already. It's a brand new law. One case, at the highest levels, literally has pulled an athlete off of the track in Tokyo at the Tokyo Olympic Games. Wonderful outcome. Several other cases have flown from it. What I'll say is the athletes are not subject to criminal prosecution, but it's those who conspire or agree to dope the athletes. So it's aimed at the coaches and the doctors. And sometimes coaches and doctors are not bound by the WADA code or our code. They sit out there and just do what they do and can never be held accountable. Well, this law allows them to be held accountable. And we think it's going to be hopefully a huge deterrent. But in the event coaches and those outside of the rules, break the law and dope athletes, they're going to be held accountable in a really big way. I'll just end, and then I'm happy to take some questions, Matt, because I know we're bumping up against the time here. I'll just end hopefully on a very positive note that there are many, many organizations. You've seen a glimpse of some of the close partnerships we have around the world. And make no mistake, there are wonderful people in sport organizations, international federations, national federations that truly believe in clean sport and are helping promote and ensure clean sport. So the independence is not, in any way derogatory or questioning their motives or the position they take. It's just simply the decision-making level, having that independence is critically important. But trust, there are countries around the world who are running fantastic programs, who have good leaders and good resources, who are committed to ensuring that their clean athletes, just like we're trying to do here in the United States, that their clean athletes also have the same opportunity to win at the highest levels. And that partnership, only continues to grow, I think, as we all continue to, stand up and discuss and claim the ownership of the community, like Matt, you have done, like your team has done, to say it's not okay to cheat in sport. It's not okay to dope. It's not okay to win by any cost. Yes, we want to win, but to be a real hero and to be a real role model and an Olympic champion, it's winning the right way. And I think we are, turning that tide, hopefully in a really big way, but of course have to continue to sustain it as things move forward. So listen, with that, I appreciate the attention and hopefully we've got some questions we can take. Matt, I'm happy. I think I've got like 10 more minutes, but happy to stay as we can and take some questions if that makes sense from your end.
Yeah, that's great, Travis. This is so good. I learned a couple of things, and so much of it is just such a refresher that is so important to have at regular intervals. And we have 22 athletes on the U.S. national team, A, B, and D teams combined, and they receive training from USADA, training from our own governing body, U.S. Ski and Snowboard, so that they are all adept at what to do and what not to do. But it's pretty impressive how regimented they need to be with regards to their whereabouts filing. We flew from New Zealand one year and stopped for 3 days. A few of us wanted to go surfing in Hawaii on the way home. And we get up at 6 to go catch some early morning waves, and on the door comes a knock, and they wanted to test Andrew Johnson. This is 2007 or 8. And, you know, they're on it, and our athletes are being tested a lot. We welcome the testers when they show up, and it's easy to forget the oppression that you feel because of people who are willing to cheat. The extent that our clean athletes need to go to on a daily basis. They can't go camping in the desert without updating where they're going to be and where they could be found.
Yeah,
it's just an amazing thing.
It's incredible what our elite level athletes are willing to do for a clean sport, and really have to do to support it. But we've got roughly, just to give people that may not be familiar with it, roughly 2,500 athletes in our registered testing pool. About 900, and it's from all of our sports, para, and able-bodied, winter, summer, and literally, and as a lawyer, I can't believe it, right? From an intrusiveness, inconvenience, privacy standpoint, like these wonderful athletes entrust us with literally where they are 365 days a year, basically 24/7. And then, have a responsibility to change it, as you said with the surfing example, or if they, go, sleep at the girlfriend's house or go visit their parents on a spontaneous moment. I've been in the pool, and it is hard work. I can't thank them enough for doing it. I wish there were a better way. We're always looking for innovative ways, whether it's GPS locators, other ways to make it as easy as possible, because we totally get how difficult that is. And I just can't compliment the athletes enough. And, someone back in 06 and 7, when we were rolling out, it used to be by fax. You had to fax in your whereabouts change. We call it the COP, the change of plan. They'd have the fax it in. I literally would come to the office every morning, look at the fax machine. There's a stack of faxes from our athletes. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here. I'm not here anymore. I'm there. But back then, someone said, and when I was talking with them, they said, "Listen, Travis, yeah, it's a pain. We don't like it. We wish we didn't have to do it, but it's a lot less of a pain, and it's a lot less inconvenient and intrusive than if we sacrifice our lives, right? Postpone going to college, or don't go to college at all. Postpone our corporate careers, live at the poverty line, and under the conditions we do sometimes, or some in the sports do, and then sacrifice all that and for the opportunity for an Olympic medal, and then get robbed, whether at the trials or at the Olympic podium, by someone who cheated us." So we're happy to do it, reluctantly, because it is a pain in the rear end. But we also have to make sure everybody we're competing against is also doing it. The other thing I'll say, and again, I think it's a huge compliment to U.S. athletes and their willingness to be open and transparent. And this goes back to 01, and I was at the meeting with the Athletes Advisory Council of the USOPC at the time discussing this. They wanted us to put the test results that they had on our website by name. And so you can go on our website today by name. And I think we're the only organization in the world that does that. FINA did it for a period of time, Swimming Federation, but I don't think anyone else does it. It's an incredible level of accountability. It puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure we're testing the right people, the right times. So it is something that holds us accountable, which we're happy with. But it also demonstrates that these athletes want the world to know that they're held to the high standard. And I'll never forget this quote. Look, it was a swimmer. "I'm happy to do this whereabouts stuff. I'm happy to, subject myself to the testing that you guys are doing in our house and without notice, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to make sure, and I want to know the person swimming next to me and on the block next to me is also being tested equally as much." So how do we do that? Well, we put it out there publicly. And that's what we do. And I think you can't understate, the commitment and the dedication to clean sport that our athletes here demonstrate on a daily basis through the program.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you hear that knock on the door, and oftentimes we're all living together in a couple Airbnbs, and you can recognize the knock immediately. It's like 6:15 in the morning. It's boom, 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 and it's just a little louder than a normal knock. But we always welcome them because of anyone. Those are the good guys. The people that are keeping the sport clean, and it's kind of cool to. We were staying with Gus Schumacher this summer, and somebody knocks on the door, and he's like, "Amy, welcome, welcome in." And they know each other. They're tested so frequently. But even on this call, I'm just looking on this short list here. We have Caitlin Gregg, a 2015 World Championship bronze medalist. We have parents of two current national team athletes and a retired national team athletes. We have, in the last 15 years, 5 athletes who have missed out on world championship medals. Chris Freeman missing out on one in 2003 and again in 2009. And then our women's relay team missing out on one because of having been beaten by dopers who were never actually convicted for that exact race. But the relay team that beat us and knocked us into 4th, all 4 of them were positive before or later. And it's just, you don't think that, you think that this might be in another league. No, this is our league, and this is affecting American skiers. And what is striking to me that I think is a privilege that we have is that we have a Jessie Diggins, who I don't think there's anybody here on this call. There's not a teammate or a coach that has anything but 100% trust in Jessie Diggins. And so we know without question of a doubt that winning on the world stage is possible clean. We have 10 other athletes who have been on the World Cup podium or World Championship or Olympic podiums doing it clean, and it is possible. And to me, that is one of those things that competing cleanly begets competing cleanly. A country like Austria, they were given a questionnaire at a coaching symposium, and a bunch of coaches were asked, and it was anonymous. Tron Niedstad gave the survey, and he said, do you think it's possible to win at the World Cup level cleanly? And over 50% of them said no.
Wow.
And it was just, that's the difference between our culture right now and that of somebody who has gone sideways. And my question, Travis, is how do we ensure that we stay clean? Because it only takes one bad apple, but it only takes good leadership to guide that bad apple into clean sport.
Yeah, totally agree. Listen, I think I think we have the building blocks of, I would hope, if there's another solution out there, nobody's discovered it, but I think we have the building blocks in place to, protect the clean culture. But it does take everybody in the culture, and, some with courage within the culture. It's not easy to pick up the phone or send a text, and by the way, you can do that anonymously, to say, hey, y'all should think about testing, or look at this person's performances. But that's, we have that whistleblower line, called our Play Clean line, like owning the culture and not being afraid to say we're not going to do this. I always kind of equated it to the honor code at law school. And in law school, there were only a couple of A's that were given to each class. It was on a curve. It's not unlike the medals. Like, the top people get the rewards, and the rewards, you get the A's, you get the most options of whatever job you want. And so if someone's cheating to get that A, that directly is coming out of my opportunity. And it probably doesn't surprise you. I'm not going to sit back and let that happen. Like, that's an injustice that is not supposed to be that way. And so we have to, I think, encourage folks, not unlike those honor codes, to take ownership and not be afraid. I know how tough it is, but to stand up, and it doesn't have to be slam dunk, video proof evidence. Just giving us even anonymously information that helps us, target test. I think we had close to 600 tips last year. Is top of the head numbers. 600 tips in 2022. We executed target tests off of those 600, and we had close to a 12% positivity rate off of those target tests. So our ability to target test based on information that comes from those in the community, the success of positive tests for actually hardcore cheating substances is way higher. Our normal, random, it's not random, but our normal test distribution program, we're at like 0.5% to 1% positivity. And so you see the value in that information coming into us. And so I would just say it's an ethical decision. We have to talk about the ethics. We have to have, I think, a little bit of shame if someone wins not doing it the right way. Sorry to be the person that has to say that. But I think we have lost that to some extent in society because we lionize the winner. We don't really care how they win as long as they win. And I think that's a difficult road that we're in right now that we kind of have to reverse. And that's an educational, ethics-based approach. And then you have to have good testing, which we do. Have to have the investigative results management process. Thankfully, our government and the United States Olympic Committee, believes in this and knows we have to be the leaders. If we're winning the medals like we did in Tokyo, we're number one on the podium. We absolutely have to have the best system, or everyone is going to revert back to what they did in the late 90s and say, well, the only reason the U.S. is winning is because they're all cheating. And we can't have that happen because that undermines the market value of what the USOPC is trying to do. So, their commitment to doing this financially has to remain strong as it has. I think that's the hand. I'm happy to, Matt, I'll defer to you, or I'm happy to take the hand, and maybe it's gone down now because I was talking somehow.
Yeah, no, that's great. I do see a question too, and I want to, before I get to that, it's from Mark. It just occurred to me, like we talk often about, when we're giving talks to junior coaches, it's like talk to your athletes early and often about the importance of competing cleanly. But I've kind of always struggled with how to follow that up with actual content, because I think the reason that I'm so in favor of clean sport is because my parents taught me ethics early. It wasn't because they had the doping talk with me early, but you take this little 9-year-old and you can explain to them that cutting in the lunch line is bad, and you can explain why. And if they can understand that, then that same kid that's 9 can probably understand why they wouldn't take a shortcut in a cross-country ski race. And eventually you've built this kind of ethical product, which is this amazing 15-year-old who then is maybe able to comprehend why not to take certain supplements or why not to take performance enhancing drugs, where when they were 9, they don't understand why not to freeze a bag of blood and put it back. So anyways,
and I flip to this slide, our true sport. So follow up, if you need follow-up content, lessons to talk about these issues in real world ways, please go to our website, the True Sport website, or you can link to it from our main website. If there's any, teachers or those that have clubs that coach, this is all, free for you all. We do have those content partners I mentioned who distribute it through their networks, the NGBs, but it's exactly what you said, and it's geared and aimed at that age group. You get a weather delay or whatever and have an extra 30 minutes and want to talk about values and ethics. There's a cool lesson designed for, the various ages. We saw in that research you mentioned in the bio, the True Sport report, what we stand to lose in our obsession to win. What we saw is coaches are the number one influence on young kids that play sports, even more so than their parents. Makes a lot of sense, I guess. But the question became, are coaches a positive influence, right? Because coaches can also be a bad influence. And so the coaches are, as our parents, of course, but the coaches at that youth level especially are critically important to helping develop and grow ultimately ethical competitors who, yeah, are going to go and win, but they're going to do it the ethical way, like many of the athletes that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. We have a question from Elijah Wienig. Elijah, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, this is Elijah's dad. Sorry.
Oh, that's all good.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the talk. Has there ever been an athlete with a reputation that got caught and then they were able to redeem themselves through continued clean competition? I'm looking for examples and motivations because I think there's a lot of assumption on our sense of injustice as a motivator for us to play clean. And obviously that hasn't been enough in the past, and it's not equally shared throughout the rest of the world.
Christmas cookies.
Yeah. So and thanks for the question. And to an extent, I think I grasp it. You know, you asked for, I think, an example of someone who got caught and then, you know, later became, you know, rehabilitated, you know, redeemed through the process, and then went on to be a good role model in that sense. Did I get that right, Matt? Is that what you heard as well?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, Tyler Hamilton in cycling, I mean, he was one of the witnesses that came in, and, you know, he you know, acknowledged and went into full detail, you know, agreed to be a witness ultimately. But you can look at videos that he's done talking about, you know, the first time he remembers them handing out the lunch bags with the drugs in it. And he does an unbelievable job, in my mind, powerful and inspiring job of talking about that first step on that web. And then when you take the first step, you then are going to have to take the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And then all of a sudden, you know, one simple decision that he wasn't prepared for as a 19-year-old being thrown into European cycling ended up, he's at the top of the world, but is, you know, one of the biggest frauds in the world. Like gold medal at the 2004 Olympic Games, third place in the Tour de France, probably would have won it if he didn't crash and break his collarbone in 06, I think, some in that time period. So there are many. I mean, Kelly White comes to mind. You know, there are many athletes who, and what's been really insightful, and you look at the two Russian whistleblowers, you know, the wife Yulia Stepanov, you know, she got caught, decided, hey, I realize this isn't right, and this is not how it's supposed to be played. I'm going to come forward and bring forward information. So I think there's always a path, and, you know, in the Armstrong case, we tried to convince Lance to do that, right? Come in, how we describe it was be part of the solution to change the culture of this sport, and help us do that. He ultimately decided not to. He said on Oprah that if he could go back to that day, he would have. 11 of his teammates did that, come in and cooperate. And I think, and you look at our press release from that day as just one example, you know, we honestly believed and stated at the time, and still believe, the fact that they came in and were helpful and truthful about what was really going on in the sport of cycling, what they did for the sport off the bike was even better than what they ever did on the bike by winning those tours. So I think there's always that opportunity, and there has to be, right? Because we all mess up regularly. So if we weren't willing, you know, there's consequences, of course, but if we weren't willing to, you know, forgive and redeem, and someone, you know, does everything to make it right. So the same thing I tell my kids when they screw up, like, just own it, go make it right, apologize, don't do it again. And that's how life works.
Yeah, no, nice answer, Travis. I have a note to make a comment about supplement use on our team, and of course, I'm not going to use names and their privacy violations, but people ask me all the time, you know, what sort of supplements do world-class athletes take? And I think the most popular one on our team, and it's so incredibly boring, is vitamin D. Yeah. And it's made by USADA, which, as you said, eliminates our risk to something that we feel is basically safe. ferritin sometimes for athletes that struggle with their iron levels. Some athletes take probiotics, though there are probably only about 4 or 5 of the athletes on the team, and some of them take it just because their stomachs get upset on race day. And then like vitamin C. Just to be the best in the world doesn't mean you have to have these super fancy sports drinks. We have Martha Schoonmaker here on this call, and her son JC qualifies in sprints among the best in the world. His favorite sports drink, it's Gatorade. Yeah. You know, we spend about 6 cents a day on JC for sports drink, and it's much more simple. The difference is it's about hard work and smart recovery, and it's not in the supplements.
Yeah, spot on. And you know, there are many who appreciate the risk that's there, and then the cost, and then the benefit, and say, don't need them. I can be a gold medalist without them. It does take a little more work, probably, and you know, planning and coordinating, with, particularly if you're traveling. But I think you can absolutely do it.
Yeah, that's great. And let's take one more question. This is from Mark Dowdy out of EMXC in Boston. Any thoughts on masters doping and the impact on the culture?
Yeah, listen, I worry. I think if you look at like the continuum, you know, you've got the elite of the elite that are under our program. And I think you're a fool if you try to take a risk and try to get away with doping if you're in our program. You got on this side of it, the master's level. On the backside, the junior level aren't in, you know, the juniors and below aren't in testing programs typically. They're good enough, they eventually will get there. You know, that's a worry in a big way. On the flip side, you've got the masters. And look, I think you've got, particularly in certain sports where you have a lot of, you know, A personalities with the money, the access, you know, getting a doctor to prescribe human growth hormone or testosterone that is going to help, you know, recovery or strength or endurance, whatever it may be. I think it is ripe for abuse. And, you know, I think unfortunately, going back to the culture we live in, right? I mean, we lionize the winner. You know, some sports like cycling, for example, weightlifting, track and field has put in clean ride, clean lift, those types of programs. So our resources aren't devoted to testing at those levels, but we can test at those levels if resources are provided, and we do it. And I think you see in some sports, you know, competitors there are willing to do it because they like, you know, going back to their corporate offices or their law practices or whatever it is and bragging about how they just won the, you know, 55 and over criterium in their local town. But yet they're not necessarily doing it the right way. So I do unfortunately think, given the hyper competitive nature of the world we live in, particularly here in the US, and the lack of ability to test or be held accountable, people can easily justify these days, seemingly more than maybe in past generations, but people can seemingly justify that it's okay to intentionally break the rules as long as, you know, you don't get caught. And I think that's a sad comment, and it hopefully is not the majority of people. But I think we're naive to think that it's not. And the last point I'll make is the biggest reason we hear from athletes who have tested, you know, doped, of why they doped. And Tyler Hamlin is a great example. Kelly Weiss is a great example. Like the Oregon Project situation. They'll say, look, we thought it was the only way you could win. We thought everyone else was doing it, and we thought it was the only way you could win. And you understand how easy it is to justify it when you believe, rightly or wrongly, you believe everyone else is doing it. And that's sort of the unwritten rule. It's pretty easy to justify. It shouldn't be easy, but it's easier to justify for some people.
That's pretty powerful stuff, Travis. And thank you so much for taking the time on a Thursday night. You know, I'd love to get you in front of our national team in May. maybe out in Oregon. We should talk about that because
let's do it. I'd love it, Matt.
That's cool. I will. I'll tell you, we are big allies of yours and of Clean Sport. And to those on this call who don't believe that it can be done, that winning can be done on the World Cup and Olympic level, I am telling you that it can be done, and it is being done. And hopefully you'll see us do it tomorrow morning in Toblach, Italy, where the World Cup kicks off for a 3-day weekend. And so more passionate. I'm more passionate about Clean Sport than I am about winning. And if I had any question about the athletes competing at the highest level in the U.S., I'd be looking for a different job.
For sure.
So thanks so much.
Well said. And likewise, if we didn't feel like we were being effective, we'd shut it down and go find different things to do, quite honestly, because it's too important. And frankly, we have to win this for clean athletes. So
that's right.
Doing it.
And it's you're making a big difference. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's awesome for me to be here, and again, honored by the invitation. So thanks, and love to do whatever we can do going forward. So let's stay in touch for sure. And best of luck.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Let's
everybody.
keep it going.